Hey everybody, thank you everybody who already is on this, and we're going to have some interesting data we show you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, Kevin, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. We're avid users of Kapoq ourselves, so got a lot of tactics today on ad strategy, and I know Kapoq makes a lot of the analysis and things easier for us. I try when I do most content to make it a little bit like, hey, you can do these things manually. Again, data analysis is really hard to do manually, not because it's hard, but because aggregating all of the data and putting it all together, that's the hard part. That's the really tedious part. And that's the thing that I think you all do really well. So I'm excited for this one, really helping sellers. Q4, we're on the cusp of Black Friday. So a lot of the strategies that I'm going to share today are actually ones that you can go and implement in your account today. There's still time to maximize those things. And then obviously we'll be talking I believe you're talking about inventory. So I can let you queue up yourself and K-pop and what you guys do. But hey, if you don't know who I am, my name's Elizabeth Greene. I'm the co-founder of Jungler, which is an Amazon ad agency, which is why I'm going to be talking about ads. So we really help partners who are looking to scale, but we prefer working with more founder-led brands, which means you guys have to scale off of your own bottom line and your own cash flow, which means when we're talking about scaling ad strategies, profitability is a huge concern, right? And so that's the lens through which I'm going to be giving you all ad strategies today is, hey, how do you make the most of Q4 without spending way too much is going to be the goal.
That makes sense. Just by way of introduction, for me, I'm Kevin Fischer. I'm the president of Kapoq. Kapoq is a end-to-end platform to help you manage your Amazon presence. We have modules that span from PPC automation and advertising to inventory management, content management, and analytics and accounting modules that really tie everything together as long as alongside customer experience tracking. We built a toolbox that's intended to give you a holistic look across your whole Amazon presence and really help you succeed at each of these different aspects of successfully managing your brands. Yeah, as Elizabeth pointed out, we really do on these. While we would love you guys to check out Kapoq, we'll do our best to describe ways that you can yourself get this data, even if you don't currently use Kapoq. I think pretty much everything that we have in this presentation, you don't need Kapoq to do, but Kapoq sometimes makes it easier.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's Kapoq. I think if you want to page one slide more, Elizabeth, is that, yeah, here we are. This is our agenda today. Elizabeth's gonna take the first sections here, and the last couple are me, but we'll try to cover it in a reasonable time frame so that you guys don't all fall asleep on us here. And I'll hand it to you on that note, Elizabeth.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will take it away in terms of ad strategy, but just so you know, anyone listening in, we are going to have a Q&A. So if anything that we say prompts a question, we'll make sure that we're able to get those to the end. Feel free to either use the webinar chat or the question and answer section. She'll just type something in and then we'll make sure that we can explain it because we're going to be trying to condense everything as much as possible into like how do you maximize your Q4 strategy, which I know encompasses a lot. So there might be some prompting questions you have. So feel free again to make the most out of either chat option, and we'll make sure to do our best to get you guys answers to those questions. Going into that, so segueing right into ad strategy, Q4 surge, I'm saying opportunity or risk. It's a little bit of both, right? The opportunities are definitely that Amazon has made themselves a huge player, if not the player, for Christmas and holiday shopping, right? So it's a huge place for traffic to go to purchase. But with that, of course, there is increases, thankfully, this year. We're not dealing so much with a lot of the FBA fee increases, but in terms of advertising, increases in cost per clicks, increases in clicks, there definitely is a possibility to spend. So the worry is, hey, I know I want to capitalize out on this traffic. I know it is a fantastic way for me to just really increase my sales. However, I know that comes at a potential cost, especially as costs rise year over year, it seems that there is this, and then we'll get into nitty gritty as far as making adjustments to the ads specifically. But this is actually how you want to go about building out your ad strategy. Is step one, you want to figure out what products you're going to focus in on, and then you want to carry that over into your ad strategy. We have found, and this is a universal concept, is that whenever you are only looking at ads and you're not looking at them in relation to what's going on in your overall account, and you're simply saying, this is my ACoS of this keyword or this campaign or this thing in very narrow, isolated view, that is when you end up making the incorrect. Whenever you can zoom out and you can take a look at the holistic picture, identify which pieces you need to focus in on, and then zoom into the ad structure and say, okay, given that these are my objectives, how do I adjust ads for that? That is when you come up with winning strategies that, again, allow you to grow without having to sacrifice profitability. Again, we're going to get into some tactical things. But when it comes to step one and identifying products to focus in on, there's really two types of buckets for these products. One of them is super easy, and the other one is relatively difficult to and or impossible. I'm going to give you some strategies for that. So the first one is going to be products that you have past Q4 history on. You can look back at what happened last year and you can say, okay, given these, maybe you've been selling the product for 3 or 4 years now. Okay, I generally have an idea that these are the ebbs and flows of these products. So those are pretty easy to identify. The second ones are products with no Q4 history, or sometimes they're products that maybe you were selling them last Q4, but like you ran out of stock within the first couple weeks. And then you're like, oh, great. I think it would have sold well, but I'm not 100% sure. Like I don't have that whole Q4 data analysis to go through. I'm dealing with a very limited data set. So we'll go over the easy one first, because this one's just going to be analyzing past data. And then we'll talk about the hard ones. The easy one is going to be, okay, just use historic data. Go and view what happened last year to identify where you can expect those trends. So you can use historic data in business reports. Again, you want to check both traffic growth and conversion rate growth. The growth happens through two things. One of them being you got more traffic to the listing. The second one is more of that traffic converted. Sort of the perfect good way as to what happens in Q4 is that you tend to get more traffic and that traffic tends to convert higher. So it is the perfect storm for increase in sales, but you want to know, did I grow only because I got more traffic? Maybe not more people converted. So you really just want to analyze where those trends are coming from. The other pro tip here is you want to check both on apparent because, and this goes more to if you have accounts that have just a ton of different variations. So just for context, we deal with a lot of accounts where there's just like amount of SKU count in terms of like just individual listings, but then also how many variations are on those listings, like namely things like clothing. There's just a huge, if you're looking at an ASIN level, sometimes it's very hard to identify like where that traffic's even going to from a listing level. So we found analyzing both. And again, here's a screenshot of business reports. You can use detailed page sales and traffic by parent item, or you can use detailed page sales and traffic by child item. Sort of the issue, going back to how Kapoq is helpful for analysis, is you got to download these reports if you want to look at it over multiple date ranges, over different data points in time, which is very helpful. It's a lot of downloading. You can go back 2 years in business reports. So one of the ways that our team is leveraging Kapoq is the ability to, again, look over a long period of time. So Kapoq will pull the exact same date ranges, backdating that you're able to when you pull any sort of report. So that means going back 90 days in terms of ad data, but then even further back, I believe it's like, what, 2 years or something in terms of like your actual sales data, which is really helpful, which means you can look at, so if you want to look at sales, so we like to look at things like product sales, unit session percentages, unit conversion rates, traffics, which would be sessions, right? So we're just looking at this over time. Bonus points, you can aggregate this by day, by week, by month. So again, you can quickly toggle and say, okay, in X amount of months, where do I see those peaks? And then if you want to drill down into that even further, there's quick like filter options that allow you to adjust what you're seeing on these graphs and say, okay, how did this product do? How did this product do? Where are the peaks and the valleys? And how did that work last year? Which again, super helpful. What we're trying to do with this analysis is like, hey, when we see these increases, in which products are these increases coming from? And then we know that, again, we need to be more conscious of how we're adjusting ad structures for those really high priority products. All right. Now the issue becomes, all right, what do you do when you have no sales history to go off of. Do I just wing it and guess? Now, you're not going to be able to know exactly that specific product sales data, right? We don't have any historic data to say how does it convert, do the conversion rates go up, all of those things. But what we can look at is going to be traffic trends, i.e. search volume. And so what we found to be very helpful, honestly, we would do this even with the products that we do have data on. But you can go, especially if you've been advertising this product, you have any indexation, you can go through reverse ACE and search these products and say, okay, what are my search volume trends for these products? And it might not know what my conversion rate is going to be on that surge in traffic, but I will know where that traffic is going to hit. Bonus points, I am going to know which keywords take priority here. And so for this, again, you're going to use Helium 10. You can click this little option. It's going to give you search volume history. We like to look at all time. Couple things here. You can say, hey, where's that traffic increasing? When can I expect those increases? And then as you can see in this screenshot, okay, it's increased over time, which is helpful to know. So I can just expect those increases to continue. All right, now that we know what products we're going to be focusing on, now we want to know how do we spend big without losing big, right? Everyone wants to capitalize on the traffic through ads. Nobody wants to waste money, and I don't want you to waste money either. So what is the trick to making sure you maintain this balance? And this is something that is universal, and I have found time and time again this core concept to be true is that good ad management is good spend control. And if you want to talk about profitability from advertising, which is essentially total A cost, you are balancing your ad spend in relation to your total sales. What we have found is that through a bunch of trial and error and a bunch of testing, that against market trends, or if you try and fight against your own conversion rate trends, you're trying to overspend to make up for some lack, that is where we find that accounts will always go into unprofitable territory. So our goal is going to be pushing ad spend in tandem with sales trend increases. That is why we've been taking a look. We went through that whole product analysis part because we want to know where we can anticipate that lift so we can make sure that our advertising is adjusted for that. And here you can see some screenshots. That's precisely what we did with these specific brands is outdated and a conceptual idea, or what often people talk about as quote like a good strategy without even actually having to test it, which by the way we tested it, which is why I can tell you this, is hey, what if we rank the products off season, like push so we're there, so when that traffic hits we'll be in a good position. Now I'm not saying don't run advertising before you see that sales lift, but what I am saying is that we tested this, and actually that's what's present in this next screenshot. Although I do want to point out when it comes to this lift, oftentimes the lift will mirror what is happening in the search volume trends. So that's why it's helpful to pay attention to search volume. But we tested, right? At the client's bidding, we ran a super aggressive strategy, which is why we tested it so thoroughly because we were quite aggressive. Again, at the full blessing of the client, we were in close communication. And what we found is that although we were very profitable peak season, because again, we did see that lift, and so the sales eventually outpaced the spend, what we found is that just how unprofitable the account was prior to that lift in traffic, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And in fact, so you can see here, it's like a 6.7% skew margin. So context on this is there was 0 ads running. This was a complete dry run launch a week before peak season, right? So there's other circumstances as to why you might see something like that. So what we pivoted to that Q4 was saying, okay, that was not as profitable as we wanted it to be. How do we identify when that traffic is going to hit, and how do we rapidly adjust to make sure we're capitalizing on that traffic as it hits, which resulted in us going up to a 28.9% margin, which you can see profit dollars also really much higher in this peak as well. And okay, so we went over again the whole strategy in terms of mirroring. Our goal is going to be maximizing what's working. What we have found is that it's not a really good idea to launch a bunch of aggressive test campaigns during Q4 or sort of these peak traffic times, because a lot of traffic means a lot more clicks, so things happen much faster. And also the cost per clicks oftentimes are what we found best strategy is to identify, okay, now that we know, again, the products that we're focusing in on, so it's a product focused strategy, we're going to go now and go down into the advertising and we're going to identify, okay, so where are we advertising these products? What is the ad structure for these products? And then how do we maximize that current ad structure? And so great way to do this, again, if we want to talk the manual way, is going to be going into product tab. I love the product tab. I've been exploring it a lot more. It's very beneficial. By the way, if you ever wanted to know, hey, where am I advertising this product in my ad account? Product tab is your answer. So you want to go into product tab, you can actually search by ASIN. So again, this is going to be at the child ASIN level. So just be aware of that if you have a lot of variations. What you can do is see this little arrow, you could pop this open, and this is actually going to pop open every single campaign that this product is being advertised in, along with the performance data. How do I maximize it? That can be found really quickly. Now, another thing we found is that Kapoq is very useful for this. I also like using Kapoq because you can look at things aggregate on a parent ASIN level as well, which again, if you're trying to figure out where traffic's directed, that's super helpful. So again, you can look at the ASINs, the performance data all throughout, but there's this advertising tab, which you can pop this open and also say, okay, not only where is this child ASIN being advertised, where is any product SKU underneath this parent listing being advertised. Again, that's helpful. So now that we know the products we're focusing on, we know the advertising structure, our goal is to maximize what is already working. And here's how you do it. Where I would highly recommend focusing in on performing keywords versus giftable keywords. This is something, again, we've tested it extensively and I can say with absolute confidence. Not that you don't want to completely ignore giftable keywords, but if you're thinking like, oh, I have to set up this huge campaign, gifts for her, gifts for him, gifts for mom, gifts for dad, all of those just like random amalgamations of quote giftable keywords, that is again most likely a potential for wasted ad spend because again the conversion rates are really low. Now if your product already works on giftable keywords, great, have at it. We're going to talk about some long tail as well, which can help you scoop up those other terms with giftable keywords attached to them. But what we found is that, again, what is working now often is just elevated in Q4. Your consumer behavior for your specific product doesn't absolutely completely 100% change going into Q4. Conversions are more likely to convert, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're searching for your product in a completely new way. So you want to just, again, double down on what's working. Use bid increases strategically. Make sure it makes sense. Cost per clicks increase. You definitely want to remain competitive. I would never recommend saying, oh, it's Q4, let's increase bids for everything because we just want to remain competitive. If you're going to increase bids, make sure it's on those very specific keywords that make sense for your product that help you retain market share. You want to focus in on increasing budgets to capture more traffic versus increasing bids. Increasing your bids will get you higher up in search, but it will also increase how much you're paying for every single click versus if your budget is tapped out and you increase the budget, you're simply increasing the amount of clicks that you could potentially get. So one increases how much you pay for clicks, which again can be helpful in terms of if you want to push yourself up in search. But the second one is going to do more to increase the traffic. And so I would recommend focusing in on that. Again, contingent on if budgets are running out.
As you said before, there's two moving parts here, traffic
Yeah.
and conversion rates. And raising your bid significantly only really makes sense if you're getting a lot better conversion rates.
Yes.
You're going to get the traffic either way, and so the budget is a lot more direct of a tool to use than raising bids.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That makes
Which,
sense.
by the way, if your conversion rate is increasing, you will see a cost decrease. So you can use a cost kind of as a barometer. Although I'm sure if there's any sophisticated ad strategists in the audience, they will know that like a cost isn't everything. I'm actually going to talk through some pro tips about making adjustments in terms of like how to make sure you're not shooting yourself in the foot if you ever have to pull back due to maybe a cost or spend increasing. The other thing that you want to do is make sure you're leveraging broad auto campaigns, category targeting to capture low, long tail traffic. If you are solely focused in on exact match strategies, I would say that really can hurt you during Q4. I know there's a lot of people I've talked to, brand managers that are like, hey, I already know all of my keywords. I already understand my entire search market. You know, there's nothing new to uncover. I've got it covered. I would say that is absolutely 100% not the case, which is fine if you're competing against us or one of our clients. Keep doing. But if you're not leveraging these low cost traffic, so there's an asterisk here, is search consumer behavior, search traffic shifts very rapidly during Q4. And if you're waiting for you to be able to do some sort of analysis to find it, you're going to be left in the dust. So I would say make sure you're leveraging these types of broader match types. Although what I will say, and I will put this very much cautionary tale on this, is that you definitely want to avoid overly high bids on broader targeting. It oftentimes is very enticing to do so because oftentimes these broader targets really just do perform very well during Q4. And so there is this tendency to like, oh, it's working well, low weight cost and keep spend. And that will absolutely come back to bite you in Q1. And it will come back to bite you hard. And so I would prefer much again to leverage increasing budgets versus bids here. So again, be very careful whenever I have something that I'm like very adamant on. It's because I have battle scars. And so honestly, trying to pull an account out of a spiral where conversion rates are heavily decreasing and it's solely reliant on auto and broad match and all those broader targeting to drive sales, it is a hard, painful road to get out of that rut. It's simply about really increasing bids on broader match types without being cautious with those potential downfalls. So like, be
You're not
careful.
the only one with those battle scars. That's a constant refrain. We've seen people fall for that trap a lot, especially on
Yes.
auto campaigns. You can get, if you're looking at historic data, sometimes the performance looks really great. If you go in and raise your bid dramatically, it changes what you're surfacing on, generally meaning that if you raise your bid a ton, your conversion rate tanks. And you can get, on top of that, there's also a lot of capacity in auto campaigns when you raise that
Yes.
bid for you to spend a lot. Combining those two things together can get in big trouble. So I think it's a very important warning that you put on there.
It's very, and like I said, it can work very well if you're being conscious of how much you're allowing Amazon to spend on those clicks.
Mm.
As long as you can maintain that control, you can leverage it for your benefit. What I will say is that oftentimes these increases will work phenomenally through most of Q4 until those conversion rates drop. And then that's where you're really stuck in hot water. So again, if you're doing this, or if you have done it in the past, you might be like, oh, what is Elizabeth talking about? As you get into the beginning of Q1 and A costs exponentially increasing and total A costs going through the roof, and you can't figure out how to fix it, call me if that happens. But I was going to say, I'm going to look at your account. I'm going to go, this is going to be a long, hard road because you basically have to restructure all your campaign strategies to fix it. It's painful. Doable, but painful. Best to just avoid it altogether. So again, you can leverage placements to capture high converting traffic again, or maximizing what's working. Don't go through, oh, top of search is the best during Q1. I'm just going to blanket, like never blanket apply, especially during Q4. Other thing is analyze campaign bidding strategies to avoid overspending. There's actually a pop-up in most of you guys' ad consoles right now where Amazon's saying, hey, you should totally use dynamic up and down bidding. It's going to be the best bidding strategy. It may help you capture more traffic. It will definitely cause you to spend a lot more on cost per clicks this time of
A
year.
lot
So
more.
I would not, unless you have some other form of control. Just be, again, very careful with those things and always make sure it's database decision or data-driven decisions versus just blanket apply something because I should, quote, supposed to, or Amazon told me. Other things that you want to be aware of is as you are adjusting anything with your advertising, maybe you have a top product that's working really well. You do want to be conscious of your stock. So again, shameless plug to Kapoq as well, but I mean we use them, so might as
We
well call it
appreciate
out. Kapoq does a really good job. That's one of the things we liked about it is the inventory positions. Also, they have some pretty good opportunities so you can quickly identify where you're targeting ads with like low SKU inventory or SKUs without fulfillable inventories. Again, you don't want to push harder on something just to make it run out of stock faster. So, something to take into account when you're looking at ad strategy. What do you do during the peak times of Q4? So this is where things move so rapidly that you want to have daily account checks. I'm not saying give your account a total overhaul every single day. That would honestly, there is such a thing as over optimization, but at the very least, you want to know what the heck is going on. And so we check accounts daily throughout the year, but during Q4, I also have some ad managers where like during certain peak times, they're like, I'm checking in every couple hours because I want to know what's going on. Things move that quickly. So again, just be aware of what's typical for your account that goes back to the product analysis. But here's the things that we like to monitor. Again, these are just key metrics to identify, hey, is something going wrong? And if there is, we'll talk about what to do about it. But you want to look at things like total sales, ad spend, ad sales, ACoS, and total ACoS. These are a really great barometer of just, again, a quick spot check to identify, is something going crazy? Traffic and conversions, definitely. I would love if Amazon would update those things daily. They don't. There's roughly like a 48-hour delay inside business reports or even in their APIs where you can't check what sessions and what unit session percentage was like even yesterday. So that's why we find that total sales, spend, ad sales, ACoS, and total ACoS are like really good. Is something out of whack? As long as nothing's out of whack, we can go about business as usual, and we're definitely still optimizing and making adjustments, but it's not a, oh my gosh, dig in, figure out what the heck happened situation. It's okay, it's a business as usual, and I just need to continue to push in the right direction. But what do you do if something is out of whack? And if you do have issues, how do you make those adjustments? So I'm going to give you a good rule of thumb for this, because what a lot of sellers find themselves in these positions, they say, okay, I know I need to push for sales. Spend went up exponentially. I don't really know why, but I have in the past, and this is a very real concern, when I go and I pull back on my advertising, I also see my sales take a hit. So I have to spend to make the money. But if I pull back on spend, I lose all the sales that I have, and you get into this. How do you go about it? So this is the sort of lens or the structure or strategy that really is helpful when it comes to making any sort of ad adjustment when the goal is to pull back on spend, but help make sure that you are maintaining your sales velocity. Is this is you always want to work backwards from sales, and it's in two different ways. So the one, when you're increasing things, and this is the one I don't think a lot of people talk about, but when you are increasing, you want to work backwards from the best performing or quote lower ACoS and the highest orders. And when I say work backwards from, it means the most aggressive adjustments or maybe increases you can have are on the things that one, you know, are profitable, i.e. low ACoS, and two, you know that they work, i.e. they have a lot of orders associated with them. So what happens if you have a one order keyword that has a really high ACoS? So we're working from like most certainty to least certainty in terms of what we're going to increase the most. Now, on the flip side, when you're pulling back, you're trying to decrease your ad spend. You always want to decrease working backwards from whatever has the highest spend. But here's where a lot of people get tripped up. They don't factor in the second part, which is the lowest or the zero orders. Very often, and this goes back to why a lot of people say, oh, I've gone in and I optimized my bids and ACoS went up. What happened is that you decreased, so it was a high spend targets. Those are also the targets that were driving the sales for you. So what you ended up doing is you decrease your bids to the level of you have no impressions on those things that were actually driving the orders or where those sales were coming from. And so what ended up happening is maybe your spend decreased a little bit, but your sales decreased even like at a greater decrease than what your spend decreased. And that's where you get into those issues. So what we found is that if you can be careful or cognizant of that when you're pulling back, now this could be bids, this could be budgets, this could be placement percentages or anything. I'm not saying, hey, if it has a lot of orders, don't decrease it, right? Because ACoS might be well above what you can tolerate at that point. But you need to be careful with how much you are decreasing. And so what we find is if you work fast on the things that you need to work fast on, i.e. the things that have zero orders for you, how much impact on sales does zero order targets have? Absolutely nothing, right? So you can be very aggressive with those. But what happens if there's a keyword that's driving like 50% of the total sales for your ads and you drastically decrease that, right? That's a heavy impact. And so you want to be very careful and meticulous with how you're making those adjustments. And so what we found is that if you can view all adjustments through this lens, definitely make moves to move your account in the correct direction, i.e. like if you need to lower total ACoS or whatever it may be, but also be very careful with how you're making those adjustments. And again, plugging Kapoq here, this is one thing that we really like inside the ad module. There is this sort of comparison. You can compare over a different day range. Like, all right, if my ad spend went up, where is most of that spend going? If my ad sales went down, where is most of those decreases coming from? And then again, you can troubleshoot those things. So again, when it comes to troubleshooting and identifying those issues, you want to say, okay, what number changed the most? Is it that spend decreased? Is that sales decreased? And then from which portfolio, which product, which campaign was that number that decrease, where did most of that come from? And then you can follow that rabbit trail down to the thing that actually caused that incorrect issue. All right, now, so we know how to adjust pushing on the things that working. We know to fix on particular products, but this is where a lot of people go wrong is the post-holiday ad adjustments. Because what happens is, again, consumer behavior shifts and it shifts dramatically and very quickly. And so conversion rates go down, less traffic, everything's down. It is the nature of the beast. It is the nature of Q4. It's not anything you're doing wrong. It's a shift in consumer behavior. And as I've said before, whenever you're trying to out consumer behavior, it's never a pretty picture. So this is what you want to do. You want to make sure you are mirroring your ad adjustments with consumer behavior. So again, that balance of total sales and spend, you want to make sure that's on point. So how do you do it? Again, this actually goes back into that product analysis piece in the beginning. So you want to look at historical trends of the top keywords in Helium-10 to anticipate the drop in traffic. You will see that. And so you can anticipate when that may happen. You can review your previous year's sales trends and conversion rates to observe when the drop is expected. Again, oftentimes you can see like over the course of the years, okay, it's on December 24th is when everything goes down, or December 23rd, or you'll see that very markedly on the graph. And then what you want to do is you want to move quickly and you want to do cleanup. So remember that lens where I said being more aggressive on the things that working backwards from orders. We're doing exactly that here, but it's very aggressive and it's very quick and it's very decisive. Again, because we can anticipate it. So what you're going to do is you want to pause on profitable keywords and campaigns with high A costs. You want to lower budgets of campaigns with few orders. Again, what am I spending on that is not working? And here, another pro tip, which is not on this slide, is you want to make sure that you're looking at very short date ranges. So if you're looking at all of Q4 and saying, oh, look, ACOS is really low, you're not identifying what's happening right now. So you would definitely want to look at what is happening right now. You don't want to look at today's data, but you could even look at the past, say, 2 or 3 days to help you identify where those shifts are really happening, where that spend is coming from that is not converting to sales. And then again, you can gradually lower budgets. You still want to observe the trends to maximize any residual traffic and potential sales. Here, retargeting campaigns, remarketing campaigns can be really beneficial. So you want to make sure that those are on if the performance is there for you. But just making sure, again, whatever's happening, and then certain products you will oftentimes maybe consumers still purchasing, maybe they got a gift card and that's like a very high purchase item. So again, if you have Q4 data, you can look for that, or you can look at search volume trends to identify, okay, should I expect some continual shopper searches and purchases here? But if not, again, you want to make sure that you want to adjust very rapidly to meet the decreasing consumer behavior so you don't outspend your sales.
Just to change pace a little bit here, this is a little bit less of a how-to and more information that we pulled from across all of our customers at Kapoq in an anonymized, aggregated fashion to give you guys a look at what happens during the post-holiday return period and what's driving things. I think we got some pretty useful insights here. But January is a month where your sales seasonally are going to be going down significantly. In general, it depends what you're selling. At the same time, it's the peak month of the year for returns. That's coming from the fact that you just got out of the holiday season. Sales were higher in December and in November. And in addition to that fact, Amazon's return window is extended for all sales in November and December to January 31st. The net effect of this, you can see on this chart, the month of January, your profitability numbers can take a pretty significant hit because you're booking all the returns for your holiday sales within the same month that you generally have very low overall sales period. So if you're not prepared for that, you might be partying on New Year's Eve and be looking at really great numbers, but have a surprise waiting for you in January as those return numbers come in and everything erodes away from what you were looking at before. I pulled some stats here to help people figure out how, first of all, what's driving this difference in January, what that breakdown is, and second, to figure out before you actually get the data, what your return profile might look like in January. So first things first, the reason that you see a lot of returns in January is that 60% of returns for December sales and 20% of returned November sales get returned in January. Especially for that December number, it's the bulk of your December sales. December has a lot of holiday effect most of those returns are going to happen in January. That's the biggest driver here. You can see that there is a little bit more returned in January, 1 month later than in December from November. That's probably coming from a combination of factors, one of them being that return window being extended to January 31st means that more people will be returning in January than they usually are in any given month. And just a direct holiday effect, where obviously if you don't open a present, you can't return it. And so that's going to push some of those returns later. But for that first effect here, this is obviously very dependent on what category your product is and that sort of thing. But overall, nobody's going to be surprised to see that we see November and December as the two highest sales volume months of the year, and then a very sharp fall off into January. I have other benchmarks I'll show in a second that break this type of stuff out by category and that sort of thing. This is the main culprit behind why your returns spike in January, as opposed to an effect just from that January 31st return window or from the return rate by month. I found this one very interesting. I think there's anecdotal stories that go around about how you might expect that a return rate should be higher during the holiday season. It makes some sense that people might return gifts, especially gifts to their, say, where they could be the wrong size, that sort of thing, more often than if they purchase the product for themselves. However, we really don't observe that in the data. The only thing that looks weird on this chart is definitely not November and December. It's October, and that's because of Halloween, actually. But certainly I don't see anything on this chart that makes me think that the return rate actually is increasing overall in December due to a holiday effect. And when we break it out by category, I only have a selection of categories on here. If you're looking for specific ones, they might be missing. That's because we put thresholds in here to make sure that no single customer was a very big percentage of them. And so some of them had to get pulled off the list for that. But all the categories where we had a nice wide array of data, that aggregation thresholds are on here. And a lot of this is what you expect. There's a huge variation in how seasonal each of these items are. Toys, nobody's going to be surprised to see that on the top of the Christmas list. And when you get down to BIS, and that's like industrial and scientific goods, if you're not familiar with that acronym, I don't think those are very likely to be Christmas gifts. So seeing that on the bottom makes sense. But what I found interesting is just looking across these categories, like I do not see significant spikes in December return rates, even for things like apparel, where I might have expected that. We really see a drop, if anything, on a lot of these Christmas related items in terms of return rates versus the average that you normally have. I was so much surprised to see that. I don't know if everyone's surprised, but I guess people might just not always return the gift grandma got them. Long story short, this means that what's driving your January returns is not very much related to the December 31 window, except it's mostly just that you have higher sales. So the takeaway I take from that is that if you want to forecast out what your returns are likely to look like in January, the best way to do that will just be to look at what your sales looked like in November and December and what your overall average return rates look like. And that should give you a pretty good idea going into the month of January what to expect and benchmark against. Because really, depending on your account level profitability, if you don't, it can really have significant impact on your measured net margin for the month. So it's a good thing to stay ahead of. There's not much you can do about it. Obviously, you want to have as few people return your product as possible, but you really can at least know what things are likely to look like before you get into the end of the month and are actually looking at numbers and trying to figure out what went wrong. All of the data on those slides, I know that some of you probably are like, that looks really handy for me to benchmark my own brands against and that sort of thing. We're going to be giving a data packet out after this call that has some of that information in it. And so you don't need to worry about taking screenshots. We'll give you a version of this that you can copy and paste and that sort of thing. I talked a lot about returns in the previous section, and returns do play into Q1 demand planning as well. But I just wanted to give a few brief comments about Q1, just because it is important for various reasons that you're tracking what your inventory levels look like. Even if you're not forecasting on a per SKU basis or a per item basis, just for the purpose of having a benchmark for the next year. As you enter Q1, especially if you sell seasonal items, you can very easily get into scenarios where your inventory in the FBA warehouses is significantly out of equilibrium, one way or another. And the reason for that is basically what Elizabeth alluded to earlier, talking about in the context of ad spend. But every day that's happening in the Christmas season, it's effectively more like more time passed. Everything's moving faster. Any deviation that you have from what you expected going into the holidays is going to be higher just because there's more sales. And I was about to say it still takes just as long to get your items in, but it actually doesn't. It takes longer because the FBA warehouses are all busy. Very easy for you to either have way too much or way too little inventory going into Q1. The way to deal with that is to forecast your unit demand and compare it against what inventory levels you're actually running. However, it's also the most annoying time of the year to forecast your demand because you're coming off holiday season. And if you're just looking at the last 30 days or something like that, you're going to get very poor estimates. What we recommend you do, and obviously this is something that Kapoq helps with, but you totally can just do it by hand as well, if you have data available. But for those ones where you do have multiple years of data available, they're a lot easier. It's best to pull at least 2 years of history, just because that helps you separate out product growth versus seasonality. But even if you just have one, you'll get a really good view from the previous year of what usually happens into January. If you're using Kapoq, we have a nice unit forecasting report that will just give you all of this information directly. If you're not, you obviously can pull the sales data, but there are a couple things that I want to point out here. One of them is you will have items that don't have enough data because you have new items that maybe they're brand new this year, maybe they got added partially through the year. If you just go and download the data and put a forecast in for demand for each of your SKUs that's based on the previous year, that will work as long as everything was healthy with that item. But you'll have a low forecast accidentally if you pull demand data and aren't incorporating issues like stockouts. So if you imagine that you have an ASIN that has a stock out and you just look at, hey, what did they sell in January last year? You probably don't remember when you're looking at it a year later, this SKU is stocked out, but it's really important to account for that because otherwise your inventory planning will basically be assuming that you are going to stock out just as much as you did the previous year, which is not what you want to do. But in any case, in both of those cases, I recommend just finding some SKUs that are as similar as possible and see what seasonality looks like there. And if no such SKUs exist, then really you have to guess, but almost always you'll have some SKUs that are similar enough that they'll give you a pretty good insight into what seasonality should look like. And I know we've been talking a lot here. This is the last slide. Don't worry, we're almost at the end. As we talked about, expect and plan for higher returns in January, unless you're like truly a non-seasonal product, it's just going to happen. Remember that the return window is open until the end of the month. And so you might expect to see a longer return delay between sales and returns for the holiday season, and more of those returns just continuing to come in at the end of the month. But again, the biggest driver of this January return effect is just that you sold more in December. And so if you just account for that, you'll get 90% of the way there. I briefly touched on this on the last slide, but I think it's very common to talk about getting inventory into the FBA warehouses and avoiding stockouts. This one time of the year is a very common time to have the opposite problem, where you overstocked for an expected number of holiday sales and ended up with demand coming in below your projections. Obviously, before you make any assumptions about that, update your forecast, that sort of thing. But this is one time of year where it is particularly important to check for that and make a strategic decision, whether that's a removal or disposal order or promotion. There's a bunch of arrows in your quiver there, but it's definitely the most important time of year to take a glance at that because it's the most likely time for you to run into that problem. And that is it from me. We will be taking your guys' questions if you put them into the chat. I'm actually going to stop screen sharing though, because I don't think I can see the questions while I have the screen share up, or at least I don't see how. Just because I turn off the screen share does not mean we're not going to see your questions. Please ask away. I see one question from Mohammed here. Can we control the CPC in sponsored display campaigns? I could start with that, and then you could add whatever you'd like, Elizabeth. But
Yeah, go for it.
yes and no. First of all, I'm assuming we're talking PPC and not VCPM campaigns here. You do put a bid in there. A bid obviously does not directly set what your CPC is, but it puts a cap on it. However, sponsored display is extra tricky to get your CPC tied down to that bid because on top of everything, so Amazon can raise your bid by up to 400%. Think of it like a up-down dynamic bidding for sponsored products, but 400% is a really big number. So it is the most difficult type of campaign to control CPC on. That said, you do have a bid, so you can always set your bid low enough that your CPC goes down, but it is extra tricky compared to the other ad types. And Elizabeth probably has extra things to add here too.
No, that is precisely what I was going to say, that sponsor display ads have an inherent dynamic up and down that nobody. Here goes back to some of my, I always hesitate to bite the hand that feeds me. The way that a lot of these things happen is unless you go through and dig through the documentation. I was trying to dig through the documentation yesterday to even find it. And even if to look for it, sometimes it's really hard to even find it. And so that's the case with this dynamic up and down. So yes, as Kevin mentioned, I'm not sure if it's 400 or 300%. Either way,
Then I realized I'm not 100% sure either. It's either three, because 300 would quadruple it, or it's 400. Either way, it's a big number.
so I would just say, just be aware of that inherency and adjust bids accordingly. The other thing is that you can add negatives to sponsor display. It depends. Like a lot of times they're product targeting and you can't add keywords to product. Like it's convoluted. There is the match targeting report, which is helpful. That's basically a search term report for a sponsor display ad. If you're really trying to dig into it and really trying to control it, that might be a good way to control it, because oftentimes the issue is not so much that the cost per click is high, it's that the A cost is high because of the cost per click. So there I would say, is there another way in which I can control spend? The other thing is, so I did talk to the internal team when the whole VCPM thing came out, and I forget what I posted about it, but they basically reached out to me and were like, hey, you have good things to say on what you said is sponsor display. You're the only person who actually explained it correctly. And so they're like, we're talking to me anyways. I asked them about this specifically and I said, okay, so there's the different bid optimizations inside of sponsor display. One of them is optimized for page views. The other one is optimized for conversions. One would think that optimized for conversions would be the best, but what I was told, again, this is years ago, it could have changed. Who knows? Sometimes Amazon says something that's not exactly 100% correct. So I don't want to say I'm 100% correct here, but I was told that there's less of a tendency for a dynamic up and bid down to happen if you're optimizing for views, because it's no longer supposed to be optimizing for conversions. So that might be something to test.
Sense, because if you're just
Yeah.
trying to maximize views, you would really run the same bid all the time. Because if you're optimizing for conversions, then you're telling Amazon, oh, if you think it's going to be a high chance of conversion, bid me more. That said, I do not know under the hood. This is the kind of thing that gets really tricky to try to figure out what's happening at Amazon, because they don't necessarily tell you everything that's going on
Yeah.
under the hood.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say try looking at the search term reports, aka match targeting reports, see what you can do in terms of bid, try optimizing for page views, and then at the end of the day, just realize that's inherent to sponsor display campaigns. And we always try and run these for profitability. And if we can't get them profitable, I wouldn't worry so much if at the end of the day you maybe have to pull back on sponsor display a little bit if you're trying to go for profitability.
If you're running a VCPM sponsored display campaign, just be aware that the statistics that you see about that campaign will switch from being click-based attribution models to view-based. What that can mean, what it really means is that the stats look way better when you're looking at a VCPM, because obviously click-through rates tend to be much closer to 0 than 100%. And so you can easily see your return on ad spend get multiplied by 10, 20 by switching to a view-based attribution model. But in the case of sponsored display, often these are the exact same placements that you could have been using PPC on, and or instead using VCPM, and they just look different. It's in Kapoq, just so we're always apples to apples, we show click-based attribution everywhere. But it's just something, there's nothing inherently wrong with view or click-based attribution. But if you're not aware of that, just know that it can really juice the stats in your account, and you can get very excited, and then all of a sudden realize a few weeks later that you got excited over nothing, and it's just the way that you were keeping score changed rather than the actual performance of the ads.
Yeah, I know this is going off topic slightly, but I would like to add to that a little bit. One just being there's three different targeting types. So there's the optimize for page views, CPC, optimize for conversion, CPC, and then the VCPM model, which is optimized for impression or pay per impressions. I was referring to that first one, the CPC model with optimized for views. So that would be something to pay attention to. But I do like Kevin's point on Just it feels like the migration of sentiment towards VCPM when it first came out, everybody's, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Look at the stats. And then everybody was like you said, oh, we're keeping score the wrong way. And so I think the model now has been like,
Mm.
these are complete bull crap. Nobody run them. VCPM is terrible. Like it's incorrect. It's lying to us.
No,
Which
I felt pretty bad when I had to be the bearer of bad news a couple times to very excited account managers that thought that their month over month stats were that they were going to have a great meeting with their client and the numbers look great, only to actually have it be like, actually nothing happened.
yeah, no, I would just say the way we approach it is oftentimes you can get really good stats.
Mhm.
Just make sure when you're, like Kevin said, keeping scores, Kpoq already keeps that score for us, which is great. You can also download a campaign reports will show you the click attribution sales at a campaign level, or the bulk files actually will show you click attribution sales. So all those things can be used to make sure that you are keeping score correctly. I'm not saying don't use it, just when you optimize it, make sure you're optimizing it based on what I would consider the actual scoreboard, not the view attribution sales.
Yeah, or if you're using view attribution, just know it's grading on a different curve, right? Your ROAS is going to look substantially better. There's
Hmm.
nothing inherently wrong with view-based attribution as a metric or using it in conjunction with click-based attribution. Just make sure that you know you're doing it. If you mistake one for the other, your numbers are like often 20 times off.
We have a
I'm
good
sorry,
question
I
here.
took us on the tangent there, Elizabeth. You were apologizing
No,
for
you're
me.
good. No,
That
you
was
took us
on
on a
me.
tangent and I made it worse, which is fine. I love geeking out about this stuff. But Chad did have a question on tackling situations of product slowdowns. Try not to hurt long-term organic ranking. He was saying, I'll read it out.
Beat around Chad Davis question.
Saying, what do you do when a product is doing too well? Which
Hmm.
is, he said, I have one product scaled like crazy and has further upward momentum. We have about 15 days of supply, likely can't restock until about 60 to 70 days. We're trying to solve the inventory situation, but how do you step down slowly here to avoid out of stock without hurting long-term organic ranking? Tough one.
Yeah, one thing that I think you definitely want to consider doing in this scenario, if you have 50 days of supply and you can't restock for 60 to 70 days, you're very unlikely to be able to healthfully avoid a stock out. Easiest answer, in my opinion, is just make sure that you're not wasting ad spend on that product at that point. You're doomed to stock out. If you're also spending money just to stock out faster, that money is going to be wasted. You can redeploy it elsewhere. You're not in a perfect scenario no matter what. You're likely
Mhm.
to stock out. You can do things like raise the price of the item to avoid a stock out and that sort of thing, but that'll have also unintended effects on everything. I think once you're in that situation, you're going to just have to do the best with what you've got, which turning off the ads is the number one thing. Would you have anything you'd like to add there, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I appreciate adding the context about how long you're going to be out of stock because that's something that we take into account. So, for just those listening who may be nearing stock outs, if there's a way that you can extend the life of the current stock where you could have less days of out of stock because you know that you have inventory being checked in or something, in that case, you might want to be a little bit more careful. Maybe you can pump the brakes a little bit, hopefully beneficial time. But in this case, regardless, it sounds like you're going to be out of stock for a while. The one thing about increasing price is not only does that potentially slow down, which, I mean, let's be honest, if you have 15 days of stock, you're not really going to slow down enough and maintain sales to extend it past, that 15 days of supply. I don't really think you're going to be able to get there, unfortunately. Congratulations on having a fantastic product. I know it sucks, but the silver lining here. But what I would say is, in terms of maybe pumping the brakes a little bit on advertising or adding more context to increasing prices, the other bit. So what we do in these scenarios is, okay, is there a way to extend it? No. Okay, we know we're gonna basically have a re-rank period regardless of anything we do. So then our goal typically is, okay, it can't really maintain rank, can't really baby it and maintain stock. Let's at least get some profits. And so that would be the other piece. That would be the last potential benefit that you can have, which one thing to do with that would definitely be, of course, increasing the price a little bit. See if you can maintain any, get more profits. And then the other thing would be when you are going through the advertising, that whole playbook I shared about decreasing post peak Q4 to pull back, it was like all the stuff that has really high costs, all the stuff that we're doing tests on, all the stuff that is more unprofitable. You basically, again, because goal right now is not necessarily going to be to rank, you can basically take your ad structure and just really pare it down to those very few things that really work for the product if you want to maintain any sort of advertising presence on it. And then in addition to that, you might also even just cap budgets of the things that is working. That's sort of like a metered approach to pulling back versus just completely pausing. Although if you only have 15 days to stock left, maybe you just want to straight up pause stuff and just see what the
Mhm.
organic can do. Can the market support a higher price and no ads? Maybe go out with a bang in terms of profitability.
That would definitely add a lot to profitability.
Yeah.
And with 15 days with 60 to 70 left, I gotta think you gotta do some pretty drastic things to cut the sell-through rate if you're really thinking you're gonna have any not going out of
Right.
stock there. So Elizabeth, I know we went a little bit over here.
And but I
And
think the
especially
only real longer one, because the second one was actually referring back to the sponsor display ads and the cost per click, which we already covered. This one I have less insights over. You might have some, or I don't know if Ryan has any as well, but he was saying like, hey, have a Seller Central client. Again, one of those crappy situations. There's only so much you can do about it. But Amazon bought some of their units and then sold them early in November for 40% off retail. And now the client can't offer a Black Friday, Cyber Monday dealer. That makes economic sense as the deal obviously automatically is suppressed due to previous sales history. So he's saying, what is the best? Should they offer a coupon? Is there a
Mhm.
promo? Ryan was saying, I have experienced good things with coupons, often sometimes only a 50% off. Few of the customers will actually clip the coupon. We've also seen coupons work really well during Q4, but I don't know if you have any further perspective on that.
No, this is I left this question for last because this one is so much sadder than the other question where the
Hmm.
demand is so high that we can't keep it in stock. That's a fun problem. This is a lot less fun.
Yeah.
Obviously, trying coupons makes sense. I feel like I don't know what the right answer is here, though. I don't think there is necessarily a good answer to this question, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
think just kind of discounts and coupons is probably just the way to go, unfortunately, because that's like the only thing you can do.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that one, but at least that's all I know for now. If anyone who's listening has anything they'd want to add for that and shoots it to us, I will forward it on after the call.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that second question was a repeat or tied back to the other one. So I think that's all I see in the channel right now. Thank you, Elizabeth, for all your time today. It was a blast as
Absolutely.
always. And everybody who is watching, and especially those of you that sent questions in, thanks a lot for your time today. I look forward to the next time we do this.
Absolutely.